Good afternoon, everyone. This is Julie Fowler. On behalf of the State Department of Education, Dr. Sheila Quinn and I will be providing information on the uniform grading policy at today's statewide faculty meeting, May the 2nd, 2016. As you know, on April the 12th, the State Board of Education voted to adopt the new 10-point grading scale. Today, Dr. Quinn and I want to talk to you about how that came about. When we decided that we would look at the uniform grading policy, we actually formed 4 working groups. The working groups are before you on the slide: grading scale, honors and dual credit, recovery and competency, and diploma pathways. Out of all 4 work groups, the only work that has been taken before the state board at this state is the grading scale. We have officially, the State Board of Education has officially endorsed the 10-point grading scale. The work in the other 3 work groups is still ongoing. We will report to the state board for information only at the June board meeting. We have a red line document at this point in time, and we will be sharing that with them. All other changes to the uniform grading policy that are a result of these 3 additional working groups will not be implemented until the following school year, which will be the 17-18 school year. Everyone will have an opportunity to look at these changes and to vet those. That work will be forthcoming. Some of the things that you can be anticipating are looking at using a rubric for awarding honors weighting for courses in your school districts. We feel like local education agencies should still maintain the discretion of awarding, of deciding what gets an honors weighting, but we wanted to standardize the process by giving you a rubric to guide you. That will be forthcoming. Recovery and, excuse me just one second. I don't know if you can see on your screen what we are seeing on our screen. I'm just trying to, if you can see it, I apologize, but I can't X out of it. Recovery and competency. We have addressed a lot of things that have to do with content recovery, credit recovery, failure due to absences, and those kinds of things. That is part of this work group of recovery and competency. The one thing that we have not done is address the Carnegie Unit and competency-based learning, and that work will be ongoing over the course of this next year. The 4th group is diploma pathways. This work group is looking at the question, is it multiple pathways to one diploma? Is it one pathway to multiple diplomas? So look for that work to be coming out soon. As you all know, Superintendent Spearman spoke to the athletic directors and coaches at their spring conference, and it was widely publicized in the newspaper that the rationale for the 10-point grading scale was to support student athletes so that they could be competitive for scholarships. One of the things that Superintendent Spearman feels very strongly about is making sure that everyone knows that the rationale for the 10-point scale includes multiple things. On the slide in front of you, you can see where we have considered the work that is going on in states around us. Surrounding states are on a 10-point scale. When students transfer back and forth across states, it makes it much easier to convert the GPAs. We have a lot of military families, and the impact for students transferring in and out of our state from a 10-point scale state to a 10-point scale state makes it much easier and the transition more seamless. Also, as you know, the institutions of higher education in the state of South Carolina are on a 10-point scale. For our students who are taking dual credit in the high schools, this makes it a seamless transition as well. So today's objectives, we are going to examine the new 10-point scale and the quality point conversion chart for GPAs, and then we will answer questions regarding the 10-point scale. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Quinn. Dr. Quinn's division, as you know, works with the data and accountability, and she has worked up close with the metrics for all of this and is going to walk through the rest of the slides regarding those.
Good afternoon, everyone. So what you see on the screen right now is the old 7-point grading scale, and I'll just direct your attention. You know the way this scale works is the numerical averages to the left column, then the grade that's associated with that. So you see where the A began at a 93, and then you see the quality points associated with each course level. So if it's a college preparatory course, 4.0 was awarded at 93. 4.5, so the weight was there for the honors class for the 93, and then the 93 for the AP, IB, and dual credit was a 5.0. And you can also see that the movement up the scale was a 0.125 difference between every numeric value. So that's the old grading scale. What you see now on the screen is the new 10-point conversion chart. So again, I'll direct your attention to the left side. You can see only a portion of the full scale here, but once you see the pattern, that pattern will repeat itself on the bottom end of the scale. So let's just take the first 10-point segment. A 90 to 100 now becomes the A. So the GPA associated with the lowest A, 90, for the CP weight is a 4.0. You can see that right here. For an honors weight, it remains a 4.5. And for the AP IB dual credit, it remains a 5.0. And then you can see when you move up to a 91, it changes by 0.1. When you move up to a 92, it changes by 0.2, 0.3, and so on and so forth. The same pattern exists in the B range. 80 becomes the B. That's where your 3.0 begins, 81, 3.1, 3.2, and so on. So for memory's sake, it's a little bit easier because it's just jumping 1/10 of a point for each numeric grade. So what you don't see is that the 70 then begins the C range, and the 60 begins the D range, and a 59 and below becomes the range for the F. So we had a lot of discussion. I can tell you that the committee that we had working on this was very diverse. We had teachers, we had guidance counselors, we had principals, we had instructional leaders, we had superintendents. We even had school board members on this committee, and of course members of CHE, Commission on Higher Ed, and so on. And I think all of us went into this work thinking that we were going to phase this in with the 9th grade class coming in next year. That seemed to make a lot of sense. However, once we got into the work, we realized that that was not going to be possible for some of the reasons that you see on the screen. First, PowerSchool associates the grading scale at the time a teacher awards the grades. So as soon as you award and store a grade for a student in historical grades, it goes out to find the scale that's associated with that and awards the quality points. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in some future slides. But the point I want to make here is that it cannot go out and find multiple scales, and we already convert to 2 scales, which is the UGP scale and the 4.0 scale. And so to put another scale in there and for it to find that, particularly in a class in high school when you have multiple grade levels in one class, so I have a 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grader in the same class, that was going to be problematic in PowerSchool. It was going to cause a lot of hand calculations on the part of our teachers and counselors, and so we felt that would be very counterproductive. For that same reason, North Carolina thought they were going to phase in. They're a PowerSchool state as well, and realized that they could not phase it in, and they did this work last year, so we're following a little behind them. I'll use my own children, my own students, in this third bullet point to say, you know, when you have two children in the same family who are sitting in the same classroom, and a grade scale means one thing to one child and a different thing to another child. So if my two children, my 11th and 9th grader, are sitting in a classroom next year together, let's call that a PE class or a chorus class or any class, and one gets a 90 and that's an A, and the other gets a 90 and that's a B, that's going to be harder for the teacher in the classroom to try to explain to parents why those grades don't mean the same thing. And so we felt very strongly that we did not want to put teachers in that position to defend that, and that would not be a good thing for you. Finally, we did have a lot of discussion about whether or not, when we make this change, since we were not going to be able to phase it in, do you put it in 1 year going forward, or do you put it in and you make it retroactive to all the grades that apply to students who are currently in school? And when we applied that, when we actually went back to several classes and ran some simulations, if we tried to make the grade change, the 90 to 100, the A, the 10-point scale, retroactive, it did impact class rank. It did, in some cases, change class rank. So we felt very strongly that that would not be advisable. So the scale will be put in next year. It will be a scale that's used going forward. And we'll talk in a little bit in a few slides of how PowerSchool can handle that process. So let's talk about that now. What happens when you enter a grade in PowerSchool is that that grade scale, it goes out and it determines, is this a CP course? Is this an honors course? Is this an AP, IB, or dual credit? And what number is the grade in this course? If it's a 92 or a 93 and it's a CP course, let's use a 93, it's going to go out and find the 4.0 and say that's the quality points. And as soon as you store that grade, it stores the grade at that time with those quality points associated, and it's forever locked in time. So at that point, when the grade is finalized and the quality points are issued, the grades are locked and final. So going backwards, any grade that I had last year, the year before, those quality points are already saved in the historical grade for PowerSchool. And then when it's time to calculate my GPA, and the command is given to do that in PowerSchool, it goes in and on the fly and it finds all of the grades that I have stored and the associated quality points that go with it. So going forward, what will happen is we will lock and store all grades at the end of the 2015 school year under the 7-point scale. We will enter and store summer school grades all the way through the summer of this year, again, on the 7-point scale. Those grades will be locked and stored with those quality points associated with it. After August 15th, or whatever your school district's first day of school, we will be converting to the 10-point scale. So at the end of first semester or first 9 weeks, when it's time to store your grades, the scale that it will go out and find and the quality points associated with that number will be the 10-point scale quality points. At the conclusion of the 16-17 school year, PowerSchool will average the quality points from the 7-point scale and the quality points that are saved from the 10-point scale into one. And you know how GPAs are calculated in high school. You have your course attempts, you have the quality points saved with those course attempts added together and then divided by the total number of credits attempted. And so it will have all those quality points from the appropriate scales saved, and it will do the calculation for you. Now, we did a lot of pros and cons with some of the decisions that we were making, and I share all of these points with you because I feel like as teachers and as principals, you may have to defend some of the questions that you get. So I really want to kind of give you some thoughts to maybe defend with parents or others that have questions about why did we do this versus that. So we looked at some positives and negatives, and I want to talk about the positives first. The 10-point scale conversion that you saw me present earlier was the least change that we could do to the grading scale. There were voices in the room in our committee that wanted to flatten the scale. They wanted to go to an A is just a 4.0, a B is just a 3.0, a C, and stop maybe some of the competition that students have between numeric, competing for those higher grades. But if we did that, knowing that we have juniors this year who will be seniors next year with only 1 year in that new grading scale, that was moving to that level of change could have predetermined the student who was number one at the end of the junior year to remain number one at the end of the senior year because of that significant kind of change. They also wanted us to consider an A plus or A minus, A plus, and have only 3 cut points. And once again, we felt very strongly that we needed to stick with a conversion that was most like the conversion we had before because we were going full tilt and implementing next year. So that's positive number 1. There was the least amount of change to the scale. Positive number 2 is we had a lot of debate about, do we continue to give a 0.5 quality point for honors courses? And do we continue to give a 1.0 weight for AP, IB, and dual credit? The debate there was students who want to take electives in their senior year sometimes don't always take an elective they're really interested in because they're fighting for every single quality point they can to finish as high as they can in their class rank. And so it forces them to look for honors and IB and AP and dual credit courses. A lot of rich debate about that. In the end, we felt like it was much more important to continue to incentivize students to take those harder courses. If we took away the quality points there, some students might be disincentivized and take easier classes just because they can get a higher grade there. So that was the discussion there. And then finally, we felt like that the changes that we did to the grading scale here will have some impact on Life and Palmetto Fellows, which are 2 of the 3 scholarships we give, but that it would have the most impact on Hope, and we'll talk about that on the negative side, that it would have less of an impact on Life and on Palmetto Fellows because there are other things that go into the selection of students for those scholarships. You have to have a certain class rank, you have to be in the top 30% for Life and the top 6% for Palmetto Fellows, and you have to have certain SAT and ACT scores to get those. So even though we would have some impact and more children getting the 3.0 or the 3.5, the other qualifiers would still mitigate who potentially got those scholarships. So those were some of the positives. The negatives, the negative is one big negative that we're going to talk a lot about today. When South Carolina several years ago went to a grade conversion chart, which is you make the floor, we'll use the A range, you make the floor A, the 90, 4.0, and then every number above that goes above a 4.0, a 4.1, a 4.2, and so on. You create some grade inflation in a child's GPA. In other words, the GPA number looks higher than what people perceive potentially the work that they did to earn that GPA. This new conversion chart didn't fix that. So some people perceive that as a negative. We felt like, again, if you go back to the positive side, that we had to do the least amount of change we could, given how we were going to have to implement this with the first class of students. The second negative is it doesn't reduce the granularity between numeric values. In other words, we still said a 92 is better than a 91, or a 99 is still better than a 98. That competition that students have for the highest numeric value is still there, and it didn't go away in this grading scale. It was there before, and it's still there. The Hope Scholarship, which is the scholarship level where a student simply has to have a 3.0, will have a significant impact, a significant fiscal impact that the General Assembly will need to consider. We will have more students, and we know about how many more, and I will show you in just a second about how many more students will have a 3.0. But that will be something the General Assembly has to decide if they can fund and will fund, or if they need to make some changes in that lottery scholarship law. And then finally, the same thing for Palmetto Fellows. We will have more students who have a 3.5 and who potentially can earn that. But as I said before, they still have to be in the top 6% of their class and have a 27 on the ACT and I believe a 1200 on the SAT. So that'll mitigate it some. So as you can imagine, the institutions of higher ed, the Commission on Higher Education was very interested in this work. They've been wonderful partners with us with this work and helped us calculate some of the data I'm going to show you here today. One of the things that the Commission on Higher Education was particularly concerned about are the things that you see in this particular slide. So these were the things that we've talked with them about in their statewide faculty meeting, if you will. We've done this same presentation for them, but focused on the issues that they raised. But as high school people, I think you're going to want to know, what issues did they raise? And the first one was there any research or rationale for changing the grading scale? In other words, did we go out and find research that said it's best practice to be on a 10-point scale instead of a 7-point scale? And the answer is that was really not what was driving the discussion. What was driving the discussion is the fact that students in South Carolina who are competing to get into our South Carolina colleges have a GPA that's relative to a 7-point scale, and all those students who are competing against our kids to get in from out of state had a GPA that was calculated on the 10-point scale. So as you know, colleges calculate back to the 4.0 scale. And so students from out of state had a higher GPA on that 4.0 scale because of what an A meant to them. An A started at a 90 or a B at 70 and all the way down to a D starting at a 60. And we felt like it was causing some inequity for our students, both competing with other students coming into South Carolina, and certainly for our students competing to go out of state and be competitive to get into colleges in other states where the 10-point scale was. So it was really more about equity than it was about research on best practice, because grading research is very varied, and I don't know that there's any one best practice. The second thing that was a big concern to the Commission on Higher Education was rigor. Would this change come across as if we were lowering standards? And that is really where the teacher is the front line. And we want to talk to you a little bit about that today, about what your role will be to maintaining the rigor and what an A means and what a B means and so on and so forth. Cost was a huge factor because this will have a fiscal impact on the number of students who qualify for scholarships. Some may say, yay, that's a positive, not a negative. And the General Assembly, several of them have said that's a positive, not a negative. But several have said we need to be careful about making sure we can fund that. Timing, because we're at the end of the school year and having to communicate this to you now for next year, as well as for CHE having to prepare potentially for changes in the lottery scholarship legislation, timing was a concern, and then finally just drafting that new lottery legislation. So those were the key issues that higher ed had. In general, they were not against the 10-point scale. They wanted us to deal with those 5 things that you see on the screen right there. All right, so let's begin talking a little bit about this concept that are we lowering standards in South Carolina? Well, first thing I want to say is that neither the old nor the new grading scale addresses the grade inflation problem that you and I discussed earlier. It happened, the grade inflation in terms of what the GPA means, happened when South Carolina went with a numeric grade conversion instead of just having an A is a 90 to 100 and that's a 4.0 like many of us had when we were young. So the old scale had it, the new scale certainly does have it. But we really want to remind our families, and we certainly want to remind our friends at higher education, that there is rigor in the high school schedule. And we are doing other things. The other working groups are really helping to bolster that with some of the work that Dr. Fowler mentioned in the opening slide. We know that AP and IB courses are very rigorous and that the standards that go with that and the external assessments really contribute to that rigor. We know that honors courses are very rigorous, but we feel like we can standardize that rigor by having a common rubric that every school and every district can say, does my honors course meet this level of rigor? And we will be working with you over the course of next year, for the following year, to vet all honors courses through that rubric that we'll be working through. And then finally, dual credit. Because we have a lot of dual credit going on in our state, and sometimes that dual credit happens on campus, the college campus, and sometimes it happens on our campuses in the public school. We had a lot of grade conversion things going on, a lot of changing of grades. And so we feel like, to keep it simple and to keep it the same, that the number needs to mean the same thing, whether it's taught on the college campus or on the high school campus. But this is going to cause some recalibration in your thinking. We understand that now that the minimum score to pass is a 60 to 70 or 60 to 69, begins that D range, and so on up from there, that you have to begin thinking about what does that mean for my classroom assessments. So understanding now that a 60 is the D, and that you have a concept of what D, below average understanding, is of whatever that material is that you're teaching, you need to make sure that your classroom assessments adjust to the fact that now the 60 is the passing grade, but it still represents what we all knew was below average understanding of the topic. So if a D has always been below average, the 60 to 70 now is that below average. What a C means to you, which is average understanding of the content, begins at a 70 now. The floor for that has changed, but it still is just average. And the B is above and the A is well above. So your classroom rubrics that you evaluate projects or writing or performance tasks need to reflect still the fact that when a student gets a 62, 64, that is still below average. That's now not what used to be failing that just gets to pass now. I mean, you really have to think about making sure your rubrics match what you say that D really means. You also need to make sure your course syllabi will have the new grading scale next year so that students understand that. And you'll have to have this conversation. Again, we're being brief today just to get you the information. We'll have a lot more training this summer as we roll things out on how to calibrate your rubrics. But you'll have to have that same discussion with your students, particularly those seniors next year who've had 3 years on an old scale. It's just not an easier cut score anymore. A D still means a D. It's just the D is now at a 60. Also, high school teachers that have end of course tests, please know that this summer we will be doing standard setting for all 4 end of course assessments to recalibrate them to a 60. But that doesn't mean now a lower score passed the test. It means that what you used to have to know to get a 70, you now have to know that content to get a 60. And so we are driving up the rigor on the top end of that end of course test. We're just moving where the bottom end starts. That 60 now starts the passing, but you still have to know what you used to know to get a 70. Now is the part of the presentation where we kind of make sure guidance counselors, principals, and teachers, because students ask you these things, we're trying to give you some information that you can share with those stakeholders that may ask you some of the specifics about lottery scholarship. So just as a reminder, you know there are 3 big scholarships funded by the lottery. HOPE requires a 3.0 GPA and is a $2,800 one-time scholarship. And if you were able to keep that 3.0 in college, you could convert to a life scholarship in college. The life scholarship coming out of high school has to have a 3.0. You have to be in the top 30% of your graduating class. You have to have a 24 on the ACT or a composite score of 1100 on the SAT. And it's the $5,000 scholarship annually. And again, you have to maintain a 3.0 in your college years to keep that life scholarship. Finally, there's Palmetto Fellows, and this is the big one. This is for our top students. You have to have a 3.5 GPA, be in the top 6% of your class, and have a 27 composite score on the ACT or a 1200 on the SAT. You can see that the amounts change there for what you can earn depending on what your major is. So what we did to try to get a handle on how many more students could potentially be qualifying for these scholarships is that we took the last 3 graduating classes in South Carolina, and we took the number of students who had a 3.0 on the old scale, and we compared it. We took all of their GPAs and we converted them to the 10-point scale, and we asked how many more students would have had a 3.0 if they had all 4 years of their high school courses and any courses from middle school on the 10-point grading scale. And what you see from 2013 is about 40,999 students would have had a 3.0, which is about 13,000 more. In 2014, you see about 12,700 more students would have a 3.0. In 2015, somewhere around 12,000. So in essence, somewhere between 12 and 13,000 more students could potentially have a 3.0 or better if we use the last 3 graduating classes as a test pool. So then we said, well, all right, General Assembly, that's 13,000 more students is a lot. Can you fund that? And if you can't fund that, what would be the change that we would need to make to that HOPE scholarship, which is currently at a 3.0, or that LIFE scholarship, which is also currently at a 3.0? What would be the budget neutral, the revenue neutral GPA that if you didn't have any more money to fund it? And you can see all 3 years around a 3.5 GPA, if you have 4 years on the 10-point scale, would produce about the same number of students that we've had the last 3 years earn the HOPE and the LIFE scholarship, because they had that 3.0 threshold. So then we said, well, it wouldn't be fair to put a 3.5 in next year as a new expectation, because the junior class of this year, which will be seniors next year, will only have 1 year on the 10-point grading scale compared to the freshmen of next year who will have all 4. So the freshmen were like the data that you just saw me present. So we said to the Commission on Higher Education, if you were to get some questions from the General Assembly, and if moving that target becomes a reality, the most fair way to think about that would be to phase in the change. So potentially you could say to the seniors next year, your GPA could be a 3.2 that you have to get those scholarships. For the class behind them, a 3.3, the class behind them, the 3.4, and finally for those freshmen coming in next year for their graduating year, they would need a 3.5. Now that has some pros and cons. I mean, it's fair. It changes the bar for those students incrementally, and they have time to reach that bar. But from a guidance standpoint, from a principal standpoint, and even from teacher standpoint, making sure you're saying the right number to the right kids, changing that number every year could be problematic. And so that's what the Commission on Higher Ed and the Department of Ed, we're still working out the details. If, and that's a big underline, if the General Assembly says we need to change that lottery scholarship, is it better to phase it in, as you see on the slide here, or to set a target 4 years from now of that's when it'll change? And that depends on funding, and that's not something that the department can control at this time. And so now we're talking about what we want to do to implement the new grading policy. And Dr. Fowler is going to take over here and talk about some implementation steps for all schools.
It's our goal to help you and provide as much training as possible so that you are ready to implement this coming school year. As you can see on this screen, we have communicated with instructional leaders, we have communicated with superintendents, we have communicated with various stakeholder groups across the state, and we thought that it was very important that we bring this to you as teachers and building level administrators. We will continue to communicate through district level leadership. We are in the process of developing support materials that will be provided to you. One of the things that we want to encourage you to do is to have conversations in your communities about the impact potentially on district policy. For example, one of the things that is not part of the current uniform grading policy, and it is not provided in the implementation of the 10-point scale, is a mandatory implementation of a 10-point scale in grades 3 through 8. That was not in the policy in the past. It is not part of the policy now. However, if you have middle school students who are taking high school courses for credit, those have to be graded on a 10-point scale. A lot of your elementary schools are on use a standards-based report card. We had a lot of discussion about this in the working groups, and the decision was to continue to let that be a local decision. We encourage you to strongly look at implementing a 10-point scale, at least in the middle grades, but that is up to you. The next slide is going to give you an example of some of the trainings, and we are continuing to develop these in secure locations, and you will be getting additional information about these. Instructional leaders will receive information by June the 1st. We are developing Camtasia videos that can be used to access teachers. Anyone can access throughout the summer, or you can use these for back to school professional development. The same thing for Power School. Camtasia videos will be developed, and these will be available this summer. These will be for your Power School clerks, anyone who deals with data, and you may want to have backup, such as your school counselors, to participate in this. I3 Summer Institute that SCASA puts on every year. Dr. Quinn and I are going to have a session for secondary principals. In fact, we are going to meet with you at your roundtable meeting on your designated day. We'll be giving you more information about information that is really more geared towards your counselors in the high school and the connection to dual credit and IHEs. Research to Practices, as you all know, originated to provide professional development in the summer for special education teachers, and that has evolved over the years. That is a huge conference, and we have just as many general educators attend that every summer as we do special education teachers. This will be held in July at River Bluff High School in Lexington 1, and the target population for these sessions will be teachers. The Education Business Summit is in June in Greenville. CATE teachers, your counselors, general ed and special education teachers and administrators will be the target audience. We will be providing some professional development during the Education Business Summit. We will also provide some regional training. So these will be specific to the guidance department. Edward Johnson and Kama Staten will be providing some training for counselors. The same with Power School, etc. So we will break these down into those groups, and listservs will be getting the information about these. So some of the school considerations, we brainstormed a list of things in our work group, and we've shared this, and we have really looked at the list, and it's evolved as we have gone around making this presentation. But the things that we want you to encourage you to start having conversations about during the month of May before school is out are things that are going to be impacted by this change. So you need to look at the criteria to qualify for National Honor Society. The same for Beta Club. Program of studies. I know that those have gone before boards and have been approved, and those will have to be updated. The same for student handbooks, especially in the high school. Grading practices and expectations, and we have spent a little bit of time already talking about the rigor and the importance of rigor. One of the things that higher ed talked with us extensively about, and we talked about in our work group as well, is grade inflation. And this is something that as you develop those course syllabi, that you really look at your grading practices and the expectations and make that part of the conversation. As you communicate this spring in sending home report cards, newsletters, any outstanding PTO and School Improvement Council meetings that you still have. A lot of you have Facebook accounts, you have Twitter accounts. We need to be marketing this message and sharing it with all stakeholders, parents, students, community members. So be thinking about that and go ahead and start taking those steps between now and the end of the school year so that everyone is aware of the changes that will be implemented in the fall. Moving forward, Superintendent Spearman has vowed to continue to work with the Commission on Higher Ed as we examine the impact of the new scale on lottery scholarships. And one of the things that she has discussed and we will continue to look at is the viability of including new measures such as work keys to the Hope and Life scholarship levels. As you know, Dr. Quinn just shared with you the Hope. The only criteria for the Hope Scholarship at this time is the 3.0. And since we are requiring students, all students in the state, to take WorkKeys. One of the things that we're looking at as a possibility in the new state and federal accountability system for students to graduate career ready is silver or higher on WorkKeys. And so knowing that WorkKeys is required and a lot of emphasis is placed on WorkKeys in our state, we have discussed the possibility of adding that as criteria to the HOPE and or possibly life scholarship levels. That concludes our presentation, and the questions have disappeared off the screen, but we've got some help right here to see if we can pull those up. I don't know if your weather is as bad as the weather here in Columbia, but we are just thrilled that we could get through the webinar and stay online. Here are some questions, and in the time that we have remaining, we will go through these and answer these as they pop up in order.
All right, so the first one is, so we are lowering the threshold from failing from 70 to 60. Are we also going to burnish the standards so that what was once a 70 is now reflected as below 60? I think we tried to talk about that earlier. I'm not sure I'm totally understanding the second half of that question, but the threshold for a D, for the below average understanding, is a 60 now. And what a student used to have to do and know to earn a 70, we're hoping you will calibrate that to where the 60 range starts. We're hoping that you don't just say, well, now that you've scored a 60, that's suddenly become passing. If we do that, we are lowering standards. What we want to do is take that below average expectation and calibrate what we think a student should be able to perform and know and do at a D level and make that level a 60.
Will the 10-point scale be in effect for the elementary level as well, or will it still be on a 7-point scale? And we have already answered that. That is left up to districts to make that decision.
The next question, are you going to consider honors or higher credit for advanced CATE courses? And that is a great question, and that's exactly what that honors work group has been working on. Currently in the uniform grading policy, you can have a honors course at the third level of an elective area like CATE. We felt like that was a pretty weak definition, and we feel like that we can have honors level CATE courses, honors level fine arts courses, honors level elective courses, even at level 1 or 2, if the courses are developed the right way. So that's why we're looking at a rubric, and so that's a really exciting change and possibility for our state.
The question is, current 8th graders who are earning high school credits, which grading scale will the grade be on when they enter the 9th grade? At the end of this summer, all grades will be locked in PowerSchool. They will be locked under the 7-point scale. Beginning August 15th or whatever your start date is thereafter, every student will be on the 10-point scale.
Okay, and this may be a repeat. Will the class rank and cumulative GPAs using the old scale and the new scale calculate only at the end of 2016-17 school year or at the conclusion of each term as rank is now calculated? It can calculate on the fly at any time. We wanted to make sure, so when this school year ends, they will lock and be made permanent, but as soon as new grades are entered on the new scale at the end of that first 9 weeks, then you will calculate GPAs just like as you always have before. It'll just go find the new 10-point scale.
For elementary classes, will this have an effect on how SC Pass/SC Ready are scored? The answer to that is no. We're only talking about grading practices in the classroom, not grading practices on standardized tests.
How will this affect current honors 8th grade students who are taking honors high school courses? The third work group that Dr. Fowler mentioned looked at honors classes, classes taken for high school credit in the middle school. And we had a lot of discussion about that, and so more is going to come about that. But the short answer to this question is, if it's a course for high school credit taken in middle school. And that course is CP. It gets the new CP weight. If it's honors, it gets the new honors weight. So it will get whatever quality points that are associated now with the 10-point scale, whether that's CP, honors, or AP, IB, or dual credit. How will this impact transfer students who are upperclassmen when entering their transcripts into PowerSchool? So what will happen is you will enter transfer students on the 7-point scale through August 15th of this school year, or whatever your first day of school is. Beginning after that, any transfers that come in will be transferred. Their old courses will be transferred on the 7-point scale, and their new courses going forward will be on the 10-point scale. So counselors, that will be something that will be a big impact to you. You're going to have to remember the old scale as well as the new scale for those students that come in. And we will make sure that PowerSchool notes, and I didn't say this in my earlier presentation, so this is important. We will make sure that the year the grading scale changed, which is 16-17, is noted on the transcript, so that when colleges look at a child's transcript and they see a 90 now gets higher quality points than it used to, the note at the bottom will explain that the new grading scale took effect that particular year.
Is there a time frame for when districts should make the decision about using the 10-point scale for elementary schools? The answer is no. This is completely a district level decision. Your district leadership will be making that decision, and will let you know at that time.
The next question, what GPA will show on a senior's transcript after first semester next year? Will it be cumulative through the 11th grade, or will it be accurate through the first semester of last year? Again, everything will be accurate and real time. So the calculate, because what the student has already done is already stored in there. And it's there if you wanted to pull it today, it'll be there if you want to pull it after the end of first 9 weeks or first semester of next year. The new scale will be there when the grades are imported by the teacher at the end of first semester or the end of first 9 weeks next year. The new scale will be associated, and so you'll be able to calculate on the fly at the end of first semester what that student's new GPA is.
Will credit recovery courses still exist for those who do not receive a passing grade? Remember, right now, for this coming school year, you are going to operate under the current uniform grading policy. So all credit recovery procedures and policies that you have been operating under, you will continue to operate under. We will not give you any direction about changes until well into next school year, and our target goal is January, so that you have plenty of time to prepare for those changes to implement in the 17-18 school year.
Will districts still utilize minimum grades for high school students, ergo no less than a 61/now 50? That is a local decision. We don't, the current grading policy does not address minimums, and the new one will not address minimums either.
Why didn't the state mandate middle schools to use the same grading scale? It seems that expectations as a student moves between school districts could be problematic for students. We had a lot of discussion about this in our work group, and there was really a mixed feeling. But ultimately, as you see, the group voted to sustain the current practice, which is to allow local districts to make that decision. Again, in sharing the standards-based report cards and the work that schools have done to utilize those in driving decision-making and student achievement, they felt very strongly about keeping those. The middle school, again, we didn't mandate it, but the department is strongly suggesting that middle schools consider using the 10-point grading scale, because it would make it a more seamless transition.
Will credit recovery courses still exist for those who do not receive a passing grade? Goodness gracious, we had a lot of debate about credit recovery, content recovery, and competency-based credits. And there was a whole committee, if you remember the puzzle, there was a whole committee working on just that piece. Yes, those will still be options. We highly encourage those options. Right now, the way they are designed is very different across our state. We wanted to honor some of the differences, but we wanted to streamline how the grades were processed for credit recovery, content recovery, and so on. So the new guidance and the new policy that will begin in 17-18 will actually give a lot more specificity to credit recovery. But the short answer to that question is yes, you still can do that. You will operate pretty much as you have in the past for next school year. And the following school year, there will be possibly some changes in how credit recovery grades are managed.
I think this question we have already answered about the grading floor, so I'm going to go to the next one. When do you anticipate knowing if the requirements for the Life or Hope scholarships are changing? We will work with CHE over the course of this next school year. Right now, the students who will be attending college this fall have already been the Hope and Life scholarship funding for those and Palmetto Fellows have already been locked in and were part of the budgeting process for this year. So our hope is that we will, and not our hope, we've actually already started that work. We'll continue that work, but we will have to iron out something this year so that it will be in effect for the following school year.
How big would the financial impact of keeping the 3.0 GPA for scholarships until the 2018-19 school year be? How big would that be? I didn't bring my financial numbers with me today, but if I'm going to go a bit from memory, it's several million. When you have to fund 13,000 more potential scholarships, and you think about those scholarships can be ongoing for some students who continue to earn them into college. Several students don't continue to earn them, so we know we've actually looked at the percent of kids who lose them in their freshman year or lose them after their sophomore year, and we did calculate those dollars. It's several million, and we've given those dollars figures to the General Assembly, and we'll be working with the Commission on Higher Education to address that concern.
Here is a comment appreciating flexibility regarding the elementary and middle school grading. That goes to show you this is exactly what happened in our work groups with representation from both sides. Are there sample charts to show a comparison for the new scale? For example, what would a current 3.75 weighted GPA look like under the new system? Yes, that is actually posted on our website. This PowerPoint will be sent to you and we can certainly send the conversion chart, or it is already posted on our website, but you can see what a 7.5 looks like under the new scale.
This says what will happen for PACE courses at technical schools and dual credit classes for student grades. Hope I'm understanding this question the right way. What we want for students is who, if they're taking a course for dual credit, is for the numeric grade to be the same for the college and for the high school. So in the past, if I took a course on a campus in some districts, and this wasn't true across all districts, but if I took a course and I received an A from the technical college, then the school converted that back at a 96, even though the grade might have been a 93 or 90. A 90. And so they would convert it back because all they knew was the letter grade A. We're going to ask our technical schools to communicate numeric grades, and the same thing applies when that course is taken on the high school campus. Whatever numeric grade you earn is the numeric grade that is entered into your high school transcript as well as what's entered into your college transcript.
If a middle school stays on the 7-point scale for 16-17, will the point values for courses in high school credit in that school also be on the 7-point scale? Again, any middle school courses, any high school courses that are taken at the middle school level have to be, after this summer, have to be on the 10-point scale.
I love this question/comment. If we are at lowering standards but recalibrating, then why are GPAs expected to rise? Theoretically, wouldn't they stay the same? That is a person who actually gets what we're talking about grade inflation, and not just making this a free-for-all that a 60 is now the bottom of the floor. We really want that passing threshold to mean something, and it needs to mean what you define it in the classroom as: below average understanding of your content. And so really understanding that and embedding that in your work shouldn't cause a lot of GPAs to rise. It should really kind of hold the line. I think obviously it's going to take some getting used to, and anytime you implement a change this big, there are implementation dips. So we do expect there to be some confusion about that as teachers learn it and get better at it.
Will the new policy address transfer students and weighting between schools in South Carolina? For example, if a course is honors weighting at one school and CP at another. Again, that is work that is still in progress. Those are the conversations that we're having in the competency-based and the recovery and competency-based in the honors weighting and dual credit working groups. Those decisions have not been made. They're still in progress, and that's part of the work of using the rubric to award honors weighting and using a process to standardize that so that every school and every district in South Carolina is using the same process.
And that really concludes the questions that are unique questions. Some may be coming in at the last minute. I'm seeing a few more. Okay, no, that's a repeat. So we hope we've answered the bulk of your questions. If somehow we skipped a question and you want to send that to SCASA, we'll be glad to get those questions sent to us and get information back to you. Counselors, I suspect you have probably a big, heavy lift in communicating this on the front end and want to be prepared for next year. So we'll be doing a lot of work with a lot of these details about transferring grades and how to change the transcript when you get a student in that's from another state or another country. We'll be really digging into those details in your job-specific workshops.
We also will share a list of these questions with each of those groups, providing the professional development for you this summer to make sure that these are addressed again with those who were not able to participate. We had a record number of registrants today, and that 3,842, something like that, and the capacity was only 1,000. So this has been recorded. We will get this out to you. There will be a link for everyone who registered today. For those if you have colleagues that did not register, you can certainly share the link with them and they can access it. Again, you can get the information from the State Department website as well. Dr. Quinn and I are available. Our email is on the state website. Please feel free to reach out to us and ask us any questions that you have and look for more information to come, details about professional development this summer. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.